Hi, you're listening to the Colourworks podcast, a monthly podcast for business owners and managers looking to improve the way that their people work together. We are specialists in people development, with particular applications in team working, leadership, customer service, and organisational culture. We've been going since 2003 and have so far had the pleasure of working with over 100,000 people across the private, public and not-for-profit sectors. Our mission is to create vibrant workplaces in which all people feel valued and get heard, where communication is honest and clear, decision-making timely and robust, and authentic leadership filters throughout the organisation.
Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Colourworks podcast. My name is James Hampton, and I'll be your host for today's show. I'm the Development Director of the Colourworks and specialise in designing, delivering and supporting our team with bespoke solutions based on our clients' needs. In this episode, we are going to be exploring coaching and feedback, the impact it has on relationships and the business benefits of embedding a coaching culture. To do this, I'm being joined by Ian Price, who has been working in businesses ranging from well-known high street brands, international blue-chip organisations to startups. For over 30 years, Ian has developed a reputation for building successful teams who have been established in new business and turnaround companies facing serious challenges, both in the private and very public sectors. Ian now has his own consultancy and is a respected chair in the Vistage Global Leadership Network. Ian believes that the success of business rests on the strength of its people. This philosophy has guided his career with outstanding success. Welcome, Ian, and thank you for taking the time to join us on this podcast.
You're welcome, James.
To start us off, Ian, can you explain a little bit about the Vistage Global Leadership Network and your role within it?
So the Vistage Global Network has been established since the 50s, now comprises about 23,000 members worldwide, and is a peer-to-peer learning organisation designed for SME business leaders. It's a confidential, safe space where people have the opportunity to really unlock the potential of themselves and their businesses. I chair a local group titled the South Downs and Solent Vistage Group, where we have 15 members who together learn together, share their experiences, and potentially have the opportunity to see themselves grow and their businesses develop.
Fascinating. Could you just talk to us about how one of those meetings might run?
So a Vistage meeting is a day-long meeting. We hold it once a month, and it comprises really two parts. One is normally a workshop with a world-class speaker, and the other one is what we call the board you'd love to afford. The speaker workshop may involve a speaker on perhaps a hard-edged business topic, perhaps marketing or raising finance, as well as perhaps those kind of softer issues more about personal well-being or mindfulness or something like that. The board you'd love to afford is just tapping into the knowledge, skill, experience and expertise of all the members in tackling perhaps a challenge, an opportunity or a dilemma. And it's getting people out of their own thinking and giving them an opportunity to just learn from others.
I love that, by the way, the board that you'd like to afford. The guess of Vistage is that there's a collection of incredibly experienced and knowledgeable individuals who come to the forum to help unpick various issues that they might be facing.
Indeed.
Wonderful. Well, you obviously haven't just walked into this role, Ian. So you've had an incredibly impressive track record of building and selling businesses. Could you give us a rundown and an overview of where it all started for you?
Yeah, sure. And it's very touching of you to say that it's such an impressive career. It's just been a life for me. For me, having graduated from university, I went into a graduate program, part of the Kingfisher organisation, and began running Woolworths stores back in the early 80s, where I guess that's where I first cut my teeth on learning how to manage teams, work with people, as well as delivering a great retail experience. I then went on to spend time in the betting and gaming world, originally as an area manager for William Hill and rising up to eventually running a very large number of retail outlets with William Hill, and a senior position in operations. Again, it's just learning about people more than anything else, as well as certainly learning about risk and risk management, about really understanding the basics of business. I then spent a bit of time working out in Gibraltar with Victor Chandler, and that in many respects was a kind of a startup. Although it was a well-established family business, it was about taking it online and giving it a real global presence. So I kind of learned a lot about a new set of skills for me and new experiences. Came back to the UK, launched the Paddy Power brand here in the UK, establishing its retail business, which again was learning how important it is to develop trust with your customers. But that really was a phenomenal task of building a team from scratch, bringing all the talents and capabilities required to take a business from absolute startup to establishing it and establishing that brand on the high street.
Had you received any formal training on how to build a team, or literally did you jump in feet first and muddle your way through?
It's safe to say there was a lot of muddling through. Yes, in some of the places that I worked, there was interesting training opportunities and development, but I think that hands-on experience of just working with people day to day has proved to be where I've learned most, and probably is the great teaching environment for me.
Wonderful, wonderful. You mentioned that your passion became identifying and nurturing top talent, which became almost the foundation of your success throughout your career. Could you describe the most common attributes you look for when building that talent?
Sure. Energy, enthusiasm, curiosity. I don't think that as a team member or participant in a team, it really works unless you've got those things. I think that kind of appreciation of others is fundamental.
It's interesting you say that appreciation of others. It seems that there's an increasing desire for organisations to embed that appreciation of one another, linking into employee engagement, well-being, that sense of belonging. Has that formed part of your career move and focus in building these businesses?
I guess it has. Yeah, I think it's important that people have to feel that what they're doing is important, that they've got a sense of purpose, and that they enjoy working with the people around them. If that's not there, I just don't think the team spirit develops.
I agree. I totally agree. And that comes from an appreciation of the diversity of behaviours, certainly. So what's your approach when spotting this talent, identifying this talent? What's your main developmental approach to these individuals?
In terms of the developmental approach, it's been one where giving people the opportunity to be the best version of themselves, giving them the opportunity to take on challenges, and I guess it comes from a very personal, strong drive that says there's nothing that I'm not capable of doing, and giving people the opportunity to demonstrate that and prove that.
I do get a huge essence of that authenticity from you today. Is that something that's always been with you, or something that's grown, or that you've developed or had developed?
I think what's developed is my kind of appreciation and language around this, but I think it's pretty much always been there. It's a strong ambition, it is a strong drive, but that desire to see people succeed, for them to be successful and to live up to their potential, I think has always been there, yeah.
Wonderful. Feedback's quite a sensitive thing, but obviously essential, because how we see ourselves as to how others might see us can differ somewhat. And feedback can have quite a bad rep out there in organisations when done badly. You've obviously spent some time giving feedback, not just in your Vistage forum, but in the businesses and the development of talent. Do you have a particular style or a methodology behind delivering that feedback?
Yeah, I think you're right that it's important. I think you're right that it can be done badly. I think I've probably learned more from having delivered feedback badly than I have specifically about delivering that well.
Yeah.
I think it's important when delivering feedback to focus on as it were, the outcomes. It's not about the individual. It's not about the person. It's about, perhaps the things that they've done or not done, and focusing on getting a positive outcome and something that people can learn from.
I got the sense that at some point within your career, you had received feedback in not the best of manners.
It's safe to say that I have worked with some very interesting people whose style of delivery perhaps was not of this age, that they were very direct, very forceful, very aggressive, and sometimes, quite antagonistic. You learn a lot under those circumstances, and I guess it's, for me, been learning that's not how I'm going to do it. I wouldn't wish people to have the same experiences necessarily that I've had. So you learn from that, and you recognize that perhaps there are some inappropriate styles for delivering feedback.
Fascinating. That's certainly learning by the mistakes of others is quite a powerful methodology if we can be objective in those situations. So I'd like to talk a bit more about you being a Vistage chair, because you obviously spend a lot of time coaching business leaders. When was the first time you were exposed to the coaching framework?
I guess that goes back really to early days in sport. I was, an athlete, and I worked with coaches to improve my performance as an athlete. So it's always been part of who I am and what I've done. But in terms of formalizing, that's been much later in my career, and become much more important now in the role that I have. And a number of people have said to me through my career that I was a good coach. That probably was a much more untrained and untutored approach, but my fundamentals have always been, so what would you do and how would you do that, rather than me necessarily saying this is how it should be done. So I guess there's been a kind of an innate coaching, but it's only latterly that it's become much more sophisticated and professional, I would say.
Wonderful. And that first opportunity of you having the executive or performance coaching in a business environment, how did that impact upon you and your relationships and your leadership style?
Oh, that's an amazing question. So I guess to understand a little of how I got into this was first by, working in a kind of consulting role for a number of businesses. And I found myself kind of talking to business leaders about, the challenges that they faced in business, and, potentially offering them solutions. And that became one where people would ask me the question, so how would I do it?
Yeah.
And of course, it's very easy in a leadership role to solve the problem, provide the solution, tell them what needs to be done. The evolution from that into being a coach is to one where you recognize the fact that the people you're working with have got the answers. Yeah. They might not know it, they might not understand it, and it's a much more satisfying position to be able to encourage people to find those solutions. My own kind of metaphor for that is kind of leading people down a corridor that they perhaps didn't know exist, and recognizing that there are doors that they may not have wished to open, or even known there, and kind of making them or getting them to realize that there are other opportunities that perhaps they just were not aware of to the challenge or the dilemma that they might be facing.
Brilliant. That leads me to a really interesting question, which I think is quite pertinent to the purists of coaching that are out there, in the sense of that pure coaching conversation is guiding a conversation so the individual establishes the solution to an issue themselves without any specific direction from a coach itself, which would be mentoring if we were just to give them the answer. What's your thoughts on, as a very experienced business leader, of giving the answer in a coaching session?
So for a while, I've taken the view that one works with other, particularly business leaders, on a spectrum. And at one end of that spectrum, there is pure coaching, where it is absolutely about facilitation and getting the individual to find their own path. And at the other end is teaching. And somewhere in between, there is that mentoring, where it's, purely giving the answer, giving the direction. And I think for me, it's very situationally driven. So there are those people who are in circumstances where they perhaps just need teaching.
Yes,
perhaps
indeed.
they just need mentoring. And many other circumstances, and again, perhaps the preferred approach is that they need that coaching and facilitation to find the right answer for them. I certainly haven't got all the right answers. I'm not an expert in all of those fields. So it just makes more sense for those people who are the experts to understand what the right opportunity might be for them.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it leads us also to this theory of mentoring and coaching and the sustainable value that sits between the two methodologies. Why do you think coaching works so much more sustainably than just mentoring or teaching?
I think because it creates the opportunity for people to expand almost exponentially. If you're going to come along in the role of mentor, then I think that there are limits to that, and the limits to that tend to be your knowledge and understanding as a mentor.
Yes.
Whereas a coach, the ability to step back, to look at things objectively, and perhaps ask a very pertinent question at an appropriate time has got hugely scalable value. So I think coaching in that respect, for me, is a much more satisfying and I think a much more valuable kind of role to play than that of a mentor.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a fascinating scenario to be in, isn't it? When you land that one question that ignites the fire within an individual, and you can almost see the torch shine from the back of the brain through the retinas when it lights up that it's actually discovered and found the answer themselves.
The aha moment, the light bulb moment is absolutely what many coaches, and certainly I'm just looking for and enjoy the most in those experiences.
Wonderful. So what's coaching? You said authentically that it's within your DNA. It's something that you've been known to do very naturally, as cited by others. And obviously there are those who are the natural coach. But do you believe it's a teachable skill?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think it's a set of skills. I think it comes from a place of curiosity, and I think it comes from a place of interest. And I think if people have got that, or if that is developed, then teaching some of the skills, perhaps imparting some of the basic models that one can use in a coaching scenario, are eminently teachable, yes.
Great. I know that one of my main challenges in a coaching situation is learning to shut up and wait. From an extrovert's perspective, waiting past that point of discomfort until an individual's actually established their own way forward. But from your perspective, what sort of skills or competencies make a great coach?
As I've suggested, I think curiosity, I think interest, I think you're right, patience, that ability to be present, that ability to really focus on what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling coming from your coachee, are just some of the really important things for a great coach.
Great. How about questions? Questions are quite an important part of the coaching process, and I'm always fascinated when I meet other coaches as to their killer question, that one question that always sits in the backpack, ready to be delivered, that might just shake things up or shift a thought pattern. Do you have a go-to killer question?
Do I have a go-to killer question? I think if there is a question that I rely on heavily, it's what else?
Could you tell us a little bit more about that and why you might position that question?
So I think that, what else is important for me and for us all is because it extends the thinking. It opens up the thinking. It perhaps challenges a little. So if someone has kind of been thinking about something and you want to break their state or break their pattern of thinking, simply asking that, and what else, just makes people realize that there's perhaps something else to think about, realize, be aware of. And And it does come with a certain economy of effort.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because what you're doing is hacking the brain right now. We get stuck in these cycles of thought patterns, which is why we do habitual behavior and think in a habitual way. And that prefrontal cortex, that clever stuff, the executive lounge, is hardwired for a yes or no. And it's pretty lazy in its functions and doesn't want to change. But that question, what else, is just pushing that boundary and making those neural pathways forge new ways of looking at things and realizing things. Fascinating question.
Absolutely.
Do you have a particular process that makes up a coaching conversation?
Do I have it? Yeah, I guess so. There's some of the fundamentals and the easy stuff, the GROW model. So understand what the goal of the individual is, trying to understand what their current reality is, what the opportunity and options might be, and what next. So that's hard imprinted for me in terms of structuring the conversation. But of course, you're dealing with individuals, so it's always a very dynamic set of circumstances. But it's a great starting point, and it's a good structure to any coaching conversation.
It's a really interesting model, isn't it? Just learning how to formulate that conversation, and it's almost a skill for life. I feel, and a communication style.
Absolutely.
At that point, rather than just siloed into one of those coaching situations.
Correct.
Coaching can be quite exhausting because you give it your all. And it takes intense focus to be there, to listen, and to hear what's not really being said. How do you restore your energy after a coaching session before another one?
Well, I absolutely recognise that there is an intensity required. There is that requirement to be present, to be able to understand and appreciate what's going on in the coaching situation. But actually, it produces energy. That recognition of the light bulb moment that I talked about earlier. The fact that people are, unlocking those doors, unlocking that opportunity, unlocking that potential, creates that energy in its own right. It's a very satisfying set of circumstances for me. That kind of is an energizing situation for me. I think it's important to take some downtime after a coaching session, just to sit back, reflect, and prepare for whatever comes next.
You're obviously hugely energized by seeing others achieve and seeing others see things in a different light or achieve things in a different way. Is there a particular case study or coaching subject that you could share that's been a success anonymously, obviously, because you are bound by your coaching confidentiality?
I think that there are, any number of coaching conversations that I've had. And I think in general terms, I would comment on those where you absolutely see the mindset change, where someone might recognize that they've had a relationship with an individual and that it's not necessarily been the most satisfying. To do a second chair exercise with those individuals, which I've done on a number of occasions, simply get them to sit in a different position and get them to play out the character of the person whom they're not having a great relationship has been very fruitful. Just to get them to have a different perspective, almost to get them to talk in the voice of the person who they are perhaps in conflict with, has proved very, very valuable. And that's transformed the number of relationships that I've seen with people that I've coached.
That's a really interesting process and very Ericksonian. Take me back to my days in therapy. But a really powerful way to break cycles of understanding, to see how others might actually see things. Incredibly powerful. So we've talked a lot about your past and your experience and the actual one-to-one coaching style of conversations. What sort of impact do you think that coaching can have when embedding a culture?
I think it can have a huge impact. I think if you're talking about developing a culture, then for me, that comes from everybody associated with that community or organization or business. And therefore, it's about getting everybody to be involved in that. And increasingly, I've talked to and worked with organizations where they're becoming self-organizing. And to do that, it's about the talent, it's about the empowerment of those people. And that can really, to my mind, only come from a coaching culture where people feel that they can come forward with their ideas, their solutions. So that has to be led by people who are prepared to allow that kind of coaching and recognize that they don't have all the answers, but individuals within the organization can make that contribution and make a difference. So I think it's hugely important in developing, as it were, the right kind of cultures that empower people and unlock that potential.
Brilliant. How would an organization start that process?
I think it starts with the leadership of the organization and the importance of leaders within the organizations just developing that habit that says, so what do you think? So rather than being the problem solvers and reacting to their writing reflex, that they do just ask the question, what do you think? How would you do this? And I think that just starts as a small thing and begins eventually to grow across an organization. And if you foster that and allow that kind of culture to develop, that's how it grows.
Wonderful. And what would be your recommendation for somebody who would be searching for a coach?
Ask questions of others, get the recommendation, ask those people who perhaps they respect. Look to those organizations who are strong in this kind of area, like the ColourWorks, find out where they can help in terms of developing that coaching skill. And without a doubt, if you want to develop that coaching ability, find a coach, go to organizations where coaching is an important part of it, Vistage, for example, and take it from there.
Brilliant. Well, Ian, this has been really insightful and almost feel like I've had a coaching session myself, just being in your presence. If any of our listeners would like to contact you, how would they go about contacting you about your consultancy or becoming a Vistage member?
Sure. So becoming a Vistage member, really easy. Just go to vistage.co.uk. Or if you want to get in contact with me, you can do at ian.price@vistagechair.co.uk.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time, Ian. And thank you for tuning in and listening. If you'd like to know more about coaching and feedback through the ColourWorks lens, please go to www.thecolourworks.com and click on the Solutions tab on the homepage. Tune into our next podcast where we'll be talking to our next guest about purpose, values and behaviours.
We hope you found this episode insightful and interesting. If you want more information on today's topic, then head to thecolourworks.com and look for our Solutions tab on the main menu. If you want to be notified of new podcast releases and other useful people development resources, then please subscribe to our mailing list and follow us on social media at The ColourWorks. We're active on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you over there. Do you want to see the impact we can have on your organisation? Then get in touch through our website or email the team on inquiries@thecolourworks.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.